Hello, everybody. This is Ming Chen,
Hi, I'm Mike Zapsik from AMC's Comic Book Man.
and you're watching AFK, the AFK show, our favorite show on the planet.
One of.
One of. So you're watching the right show. Keep watching, and keep watching.
And keep watching. And keep watching. Don't stop.
My name is Shern Min Chow, and I'm with Channel 11, and I'm sure, like all of you, are huge fans, grew up watching Star Trek. I got to tell you as a side note, when my brother graduated from law school, underneath his JD robes, he wore, a Star Trek uniform. So it is a huge treat to be able to introduce to you today George Takei, Mr. Sulu, a man who is known to generations as an actor not just from a few decades ago, but also coming into a renaissance. Oh my. He has had a second and third win, acting, stage, singing, and on social media. I love it that a man in his 70s has 8.5 million followers on Facebook, 1.5 million followers on Twitter. That is amazing. So ladies and gentlemen, without any more ado, my great pleasure to introduce to you George Takei. Oh my.
Oh my. You guys are fantastic. How many people are here? I mean, what's the capacity of this place? This is fantastic. How many? I'm amazed. You are fantastic. And let me thank all of you here gathered here, because next year, 2016, is going to be the golden anniversary of Star Trek. And you did it. "50 years old. We're 50 years old." Oh, that feels good to say I'm 50 years old. This is an incredible phenomenon because Star Trek, when it first came on the air, first run back in 1966, it was very low rated. In fact, despite the low rating, at the beginning of each episode, we announced that we were boldly going on a 5-year mission. 5-year mission where we met a lot of dangerous adversaries. Most dangerous of all was the Klingons, we thought. But after 3 seasons of announcing that we're on a 5-year mission, we discovered that the Klingons weren't the most dangerous adversary. The most dangerous adversary were the NBC programming executives. They aborted our 5-year mission in 3 years. But in those 3 years, we got fans who were absolutely relentless. They were determined to see Star Trek come back. And looking out there, yes, I can recognize you, the original fans. There you are. I can see the color of your hair, or the lack thereof. And bless your hearts, you were like tribbles. You reproduced. generation after generation, and we're now 3 generations into Star Trek fans in one family, and all of them are Star Trek fans, generation after generation. And we too have been productive. We have been procreating spin-off series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. And because of you, Star Trek is now celebrating its 50th birthday next year. Because, we just worked on Star Trek, and Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek. But this phenomenon of this 50-year longevity was created by you fans. You're the ones who deserve the credit for this incredible longevity, because you were relentless in your letter writing, in your advocacy, and when finally, 10 years after we were canceled, we came back as a major feature film. I know some of you didn't like it, and I didn't like it either. However, despite that, because it was Star Trek, you guys all went first to the first screening, but then you kept going over and over and over again, screening after screening after screening, and it exploded to the box office. And that's when Paramount said, all right, we'll make another one, but only a second one, because Star Trek is too costly, and the first one went way over budget and way over schedule. But with the second one, they cut the budget, and they brought in a new producer, Harv Bennett, who was a very, very disciplined producer, and we did it for much, much less than the first one. And it was released. And again, it exploded at the box office, because by this time, you had children with you, and the whole family came out to see the film, and that became very profitable. And so Star Trek became a series of Star Trek movies, and it's because of you fans. And I'm here to say, on behalf of all of us who worked on Star Trek, thank you for your undying support and dedication and love for Star Trek. You made us live long. Star Trek lived long and prospered, as the Vulcans used to say, and we owe it to all of you. We lived much longer than we expected to live, and we have prospered in so many wonderful ways. So we're grateful for that. But when you've been around for this long, inevitably there's the loss that comes with it. And just at the beginning of this month, we lost another one of our colleagues, Grace Lee Whitney, who played the yeoman Rand, passed away. And she will be very, very missed. And it's hard to imagine Gracie no longer being with us, because she was such a vivacious presence. And as I'm sure all of you know, earlier this year in February, we lost Leonard Nimoy, who played Mr. Spock. Gene Roddenberry used to say Leonard was the conscience of Star Trek. He was a man who had principles and ideals. And just to give you an example of that, when Star Trek, after we were canceled, was bought by this company that did animation, and they were going to do Star Trek as a animated series, they said they had a very limited budget. And they hired just Bill Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, Jimmy Doohan, and Majel Barrett to do the voices, the voices of the characters that they played, and Jimmy Doohan and Majel Barrett to do Jimmy to do the male voices and Majel to do the female voices. When Leonard found out about that, he said, "Why are the others not hired?" and they said, well, we have a very limited budget and we can't afford them. And he said, then you're not going to be able to afford me, because Star Trek was about diversity. Diversity coming together and working in concert as a team. And the two people that represented diversity the most on the show were Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, and George Takei, who played Sulu. And if they're not going to be with this show, I'm not interested in doing this show. That's an extraordinary position for an actor to take, to give up his job on a principle. Because Star Trek was about diversity, and that diversity idea was lost in the casting. And because Mr. Spock was so essential to the telling of the story of Star Trek, that they just happened to find the money for Nichelle and me. Walter was someone else who was not hired, but again, Leonard Nimoy said, we need to bring Walter in, at least as a writer, because he's a very talented writer, and he got a contract to write one of the shows. But that's the kind of man that Leonard Nimoy was. He was an extraordinary, rare human being, and also a very dear friend. He's introduced me at so many of the events that I've appeared at, but I was most touched late last year. There was a documentary made on Brad and my life, and we had a special screening for my colleagues from Star Trek. And we sent out invitations to everybody. But I wasn't expecting Leonard to come because he had been ill for some time. He had COPD. What is that now? Congestive obstructive pulmonary disease. Leonard was a smoker, and he was paying the price for it. He had difficulty breathing. And knowing that, we sent him an invitation, but we didn't expect him to come. But on the day of the screening, he called and said he's coming. And we were taken aback by that. He's supposed to be ill. And when he arrived on a wheelchair, and he had his breathing device, that thing that's attached to the nose to that oxygen tank. I was so touched, but that's the kind of friend that he was. Even when he was ill, he found some way to come and see his friend's documentary. He was a very special guy, and he will be missed. And occasionally when I look at the sky and see the stars up there, I see Leonard's spirit up there in the sky. But Gene Roddenberry, the man who created Star Trek, is literally up there, because when he passed, he had his ashes shot up there, and he literally is up there in the sky among the stars, to the stars, an eminently appropriate place for Gene. And inspired by that, when Jimmy Doohan, who played Scotty, passed, he had his ashes shot up there too. But Jimmy Doohan loved the earth too much. His shell fell back down. It was found on somewhere in New Mexico. But I still see his spirit up there. So we're losing our dear friends one after the other. But they've left a great legacy for us. And that is another one of the gifts that we've been given. So to all of you here, and to those tens of thousands of people beyond this room, we say thank you for a wonderful gift. We've lived much longer than we ever expected to, and prospered in so many wonderful ways. And you too, live long and prosper. And now for the fun part. Let's have our conversation. I see a mic here, and are there other mics set up? This is the one? Okay, so join us down here so that everyone can hear your comments, your thoughts, your ideas, your remembrances, and your criticisms. Let them come. You're first.
First, I'd like to say welcome to Houston. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I was wondering if you had any influence or if you thought that they would have an openly gay character in the new Star Trek series.
In the new Star Trek?
In the new movies that they're making.
Oh, in the new movie. I talked to Gene Roddenberry about Star Trek and, the fact that it uses science fiction as a metaphor for issues of our time. Because we did deal with the civil rights movement back in the 60s, or the Cold War that was at its coldest point back in the 60s, or the Vietnam War, issues of the times. And very privately, I had a conversation with Gene, and I said, well, we have this issue of sexual orientation in our society, and we haven't dealt with that. What are your thoughts on it? And he said, I'm very much aware of that, and I want to do it, but I'm walking a very tight rope with Star Trek. We're really pushing the envelope. And he said, as a matter of fact, we had the very first black-white kiss on one of our episodes. You might know the show that I'm talking to, where Captain Kirk kisses Uhura. That was a very venturesome scene that was filmed there. However, many of the stations in the South refused to air it. It was literally blacked out, if you'll excuse the term. That episode was not shown, and so our ratings plummeted. It was the lowest rated episode of all our Star Trek episodes. And he said, I can't afford to push the envelope too much. And if I did that, then the show will be off, and I won't be able to make any statement at all. I've got to keep the show on so that I can make the statements that I'm making. And I understood that. It's a game of the ratings. And if the ratings are continuously low, you'll be canceled. And it was continuously low all the way through the third season. And so it was canceled. So Gene Roddenberry was mindful about it. However, a rumor that I've heard about the next movie that's being planned, which will be released as our celebratory movie for the 50th anniversary, it seems they are toying with the idea of including a character who is gay. We don't know how it's going to go yet. It's still in the early planning stages. So we will see. But that is the scuttlebutt around the studios.
Excellent, excellent.
Your turn.
All right, so Star Trek has always taught me about diversity. When I was very young, I started watching
Talking
it.
about what?
Oh, I'm sorry. Star Trek has always taught me about diversity when I first started watching it. And when I learned that you had come out, it gave me the courage to come out as well. And so... I just wanted to know if you had any advice for people who are facing adversity and their differences. If you could offer us some words of encouragement.
Well, we are living in a changing world, and a rapidly changing world. I mean, I'm astounded by the pace of progress that's being made. Just yesterday, there was a landmark historic event that happened. You know all what it is. Yesterday, we were all Irish, weren't we? Me too. We were proud to be Irish, a Catholic nation. In a resounding landslide vote, voted for equality for LGBT people and their right to share in the same right of marriage as everybody else. It was a landmark event, and we celebrated it, and even Mother Nature celebrated it, because over Dublin, there was not just one rainbow, but two rainbows. What a great way to celebrate. And next month, in June, the latter part of June, there will be a ruling coming down from the United States Supreme Court. And I am looking forward to it with great optimism. It's not cautious optimism, it's very affirmative optimism. Because when I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. And alas, right now, your state is not part of the United States.
No.
Yes, aren't you? You're mindful of that? 37 states in the United States have marriage equality. 13 states do not, which includes Texas, which is a big state. But the ruling from the United States Supreme Court, I think, is going to make us truly the United States of America and welcome Texas to the rest of us. Equality for all.
Hello, Mr. Takei.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about your work with the Mr. Talented Howard Stern. Howard Stern. What was your experience communicating a gay man's experience to his straight male, stripper-loving audience?
You all know Howard Stern, right? You know who he is. He's a very popular shock jock, some people call him. When you're a working actor in New York and you're doing a play, the publicist gives you your daily assignment to talk about the play, to promote it. And this was back in 1990. I had my assignment for that particular morning. It was this radio station on Madison Avenue. And it said, The Howard Stern Show. Didn't know him from Adam. I walked over to the station, and they asked me to wait. And so I sat there in the green room flipping through magazines. And they had the radio on in that room. And it was the most disgusting discussion you could ever be listening to. And I said to the guy sitting next to me, who was also waiting to go on, why can't they get some nice music on this station? This is really reprehensible, this discussion going on. And he said, that's the show, we're waiting to go on. I thought, oh my. And then they came to get me, this assistant came to get me, and I walked in and into the recording booth. And here's this skinny guy with rimmed glasses and a wild head of hair. And I said, good morning. And he said, oh, you have a deep voice. Anyone with a voice that deep has to have a big dong. I said, I beg your pardon? And he said, you must have a big dong. I said, are we on the air? And he said, yep. And I said, oh my. And he had it on tape. My innocent and purely spontaneous, oh my, was on tape. And ever since then, whenever something outrageous or something shocking goes on that show, he presses a button, and whether I'm there or not, my voice comes on with, oh my. But in 2005, when, You know, I was an activist all my life on social justice issues, whether it's the civil rights movement, and I marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, who inspired me. And I was in the peace movement during the Vietnam War. I became a member of the EIPJ, Entertainment Industry for Peace and Justice, and worked together with people like Jane Fonda and Donald Sutherland. And in the 70s, when a movement began to get an apology and redress for the unconstitutional imprisonment of innocent Japanese Americans in U.S. internment camps during the Second World War, I became active in that. I testified at the congressional hearing on that. And all during that time, I was silent about the one issue that was closest, the issue that was an immutable part of me, the fact that I'm gay. I was silent on that because I desperately wanted my career. I passionately loved acting, and I knew that that would be taken away if it was known that I'm gay. So I was silent on that. But in 2005, even before that, in 2003, a landmark event happened. Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled that marriage equality is constitutional, and Massachusetts became the first state to have marriage equality. And then, 2 years later, in 2005, California did another landmark event, not through the courts, but this time through the legislature, the people's representatives. The California State Legislature, both the Senate and the Assembly, voted for marriage equality. That bill went to the desk of the governor, and if the governor signed it, then that would have been the law of the state. Unfortunately, at that time, the governor happened to be a movie star named Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was an arch conservative. And when the bill landed on his desk, he vetoed it. And I was livid. I was angry. And that's when I decided I've got to take some risks, that I've got to show some courage. And I spoke to the press for the first time as a gay man, and I blasted Schwarzenegger's veto. So I too am a fallible human being. I kept silent when others were out there on the, in the trenches, creating that climate for equality. And I felt that in 2005, I had to play my part. And that's when I came out, and ever since then, I've been active in the movement to get equality for the LGBT people. But actually, we are doing this for everyone. And I'm doing it especially for the young straight couples, because they're the ones that are going to be making the gay babies of tomorrow. I'm looking to the future. And I don't want future families to go through the anguish that our families now, today, have to go through. And some families who are so, who consider social approval or disapproval on a higher plane than the most natural thing, which is parental love for their child, or the child's love for the parents. And they do the most unnatural thing. They kick the child out of their families. And they suffer as well as the kid that was kicked out of the family. And that's the point. You know, we are all literally members of a family. We're children of straight people. Our siblings are straight. We are literally blood kin, members of the family. And how people's thinking can be so twisted as to cut themselves off from their blood kin simply because of the orientation of that child. We are doing it for the families of the future so that they won't suffer the anguish that so many families right now in our generation are suffering. I'm doing it for the gay babies of tomorrow and their parents. So that is my response to your question. Long-winded, I know.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
I love talking, as you know. Sometimes I overtalk, don't I? So you'll have to cut me off when I'm going on and on.
I don't think I'm going to do that. But anyway, here's my question. Obviously, it's impossible to deny the similarities, the marriage between Star Trek and the real world, the space race, iPads, you know, all the technological aspects, and of course the political aspects that you've already spoken about. My question is, taking into account all the things you've already said, gay rights and whatnot, where would you really like to see Star Trek go in the future? Where would you like to see Star Trek boldly go in the future? Besides just gay rights. Obviously, we're going there.
Well, you know, Star Trek's enjoyed this great longevity, but Star Trek really was Gene Roddenberry's vision. You know, he had a view of the human future. He had a very optimistic, bright view of the future. The issues that trouble us today, you know, the issues of race. And, you know, that was 50 years ago that we did that. And we still have racial issue challenges. Ferguson, the fact that innocent young African-American men are being shot down by law enforcement officers. We need professionalism there, you know. And so we have so many issues today. And Star Trek dealt with the issues of the time back then. And Star Trek has enjoyed this longevity up to this point. But in many ways, I think Gene Roddenberry's vision has fallen off the agenda. I mean, the rebooted Star Trek is a lot of fun. It's rip snorting good space opera. And J.J. Abrams is a great action-adventure movie director. And seeing, you know, all the new cast, and I think it's wonderfully cast. I mean, particularly Carl Urban has captured DeForest Kelley's whole metabolism, you know, the body movement and his speech patterns. It's amazing, this cast. And Chris Pine is a great hero, Captain Kirk. And the way he dashes down that corridor, you know. I mean, if we were to see Bill Shatner doing that, that would not be a pretty sight, you know.
Well, Thor is his dad, so.
What?
Thor is his dad, so there's probably a reason for that.
Yeah. And Zach Quinto is wonderful as Spock. Wonderful actors, you know, but it doesn't have that subtext. You know, what was enjoyable about Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek was you could enjoy the sci-fi story, but you can also see beyond the sci-fi story to his commentary on real issues of the time. Yeah. And that doesn't exist in the Star Trek now. So your question was, what do I foresee for the future of Star Trek? I would like to see us go back to the past, you know, the future in the past, where we get that dimension to Star Trek, where we can see a wonderful sci-fi action adventure and say, oh, that's the Ukraine, what's happening there. Oh, this character is really patterned after Putin, despicable villain, you know. I mean, you know, that's part of the fun of seeing that additional dimension to Star Trek. And we're losing that. So what I see for the future is my hope that another dimension can be added that we once had.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Diane. First, I
like a lot of other people, want to say thank you for everything that you've done for the community, because when you came out, it was such an inspiration, and all the work that you've done since has been so influential.
Well, I'm not doing it for the community. I'm doing it for us. I'm part of the community. So, it's very self-serving, if you want to say that.
But what I wanted to ask about was completely different. After Star Trek, you did a lot of these very cool little bizarre films that were not wide release, not very well known, a lot of obscure stuff that was tons of fun. Whiplash is one that comes to mind. What of those were the most fun? What did you really enjoy doing that was obscure so you guys could just really let go and do whatever you wanted to?
Whiplash, the one that you referred to, that the real title of that was Oblivion.
Oblivion, yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And guess where we filmed that? It takes place on an alien planet. And we're colonizing this alien planet. And it's sort of like a Western frontier town. And I played a doctor in that frontier town. It's sort of like Gunsmoke. And Gunsmoke had a doctor. I forget that doctor's name on Gunsmoke, but I played the town doctor who was an alcoholic. And the script was written by Peter David, who's here for this convention right now. As a matter of fact, tonight we're having dinner with Peter and his wife. And I like to do a little improvisation in filmmaking. They had once, and Julie Newmar was playing the saloon owner. She played the Catwoman, and her character was named Kitty in this movie. And I spend a lot of time in her saloon. My character does, not me, but my character. And he is a totally lost alcoholic. He's a brilliant doctor, but in the evenings, you don't go to him because he is totally unreliable. And she finally kicks him out, and he takes the near-empty whiskey bottle with him and goes staggering out, and then leans on this wooden pillar, and he looks at that whiskey bottle, and he tips it and drinks out of it. But before he does that, he says, "Beam me up, Jim." It's a Jim Beam whiskey bottle. I improvised that, and Peter will never forgive me for having done that to his script. Ask him about it. Just say to him, "What do you think of Jim Beam whiskey?" And he will go into a fury. And if you know Peter, he can go into a fury. And I enjoyed working on that, but we filmed that in Romania, of all places. I never thought I never thought of any of the countries in that part of the world, And it was a wonderful experience. It was, mixed with a lot of, there's abject poverty there. And it was right after the revolution. And there were still bullet holes in a lot of the buildings in Bucharest. Movies will take you to a lot of new experiences that you never expected to have. But I did experience a whole new part of the world, which I would not have. And I worked with a lot of good people, fun people, and got a chance to get to know Peter very well, and also get him as angry as I could have got him. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing Oblivion. And whenever you see that movie being listed on some late night show, tune in and see what you think of, what was the name of the doctor I played? Do you remember the name? Doc, what? Doc Valentine, that's right. Oh, thank you. You saw that too, huh? I had fun playing Doc Valentine. Can you imagine me playing a guy named Doc Valentine. Sci-fi is wonderful that way. I love sci-fi.
And that's our last question.
What?
That's our last question. That's our last question.
Oh, we've run out of time. Well, I've had a lot of fun chatting with you, and I'll be signing again, so we'll have a chance to have abbreviated conversations. However, I have my hubby with me there, and he is a strict disciplinarian. He keeps prodding me. All right, move on, move on. So if I have to cut my conversation with you short, that's because of Brad behind me. Live long and prosper. Thank you very much.